Hello everyone, my name is Denise Lorenzo and this is my presentation on vulnerable populations and risk factors for vulnerability. Despite efforts of the United States to eliminate disparities in healthcare, significant disparities continue in vulnerable population. Risk factors to vulnerability include poverty, low levels of education, lack of access to healthcare, health status, inadequate nutrition, and stress. To the right is a diagram that illustrates the interrelationship of these risk factors. All these risk factors intersect with each other and are related to each other. Let's start with poverty. Poverty is a leading risk factor to vulnerability. Poor people lack financial resources, so then lack of money would not give them the right education due to affordability. As a result of lack of education or low levels of education, poor people lack the knowledge to access information, low literacy, lack of education to get employment, and then it makes it more difficult for them to obtain health insurance and access to health care. If they do not have access to health care, then the next risk factor making them vulnerable is health status. Vulnerable population suffers from acute and chronic illness. The complex health problems of this population include the inability to obtain proper nutrition, inability to afford healthy food, inability to meet the physical needs of the body, which then would lead to stress. Stress in living on the streets, stress from cumulative adverse life experiences, and hopelessness. All these risk factors are related to each other, and one thing leads to another. Poverty has a direct effect on education, lack of health care, health status, nutrition, and stress. Education in the same manner has a direct effect of lack of access to health care, health status, nutrition, and stress. Lack of access to health care has a direct effect on health status and nutrition and stress. Nutrition has a direct effect on stress, and the cycle continues. To expand further on the risk factors versus poverty, most people are Black, Hispanics, and other minorities are socioeconomically disadvantaged. They have decreased earnings or no income at all. Changes in labor force force them out of the workplace. There is now a trend of the increased female-headed households, like single parents. There is also decreased availability of low housing, leading to homelessness, and poor people do not go to school and have inadequate education, which leads to the next risk factor of education. Poor people have low literacy. Um, to have low education levels, it has been found that increased mortality is noted in people with little or no education. On the other hand, highly educated persons have access to healthcare, and highly educated people understand information. If they understand information, then they have access to healthcare, which leads to the next risk factor of lack of access to healthcare. Low education, like I said, and literacy, it is difficult for them to find employment, so they do not have healthcare insurance. An example of these people would be the immigrants with no insurance, minority ethnic groups also, or people just living in the rural areas with no healthcare providers and no clinics. So if there is lack of access to healthcare, then their health status suffers, leading to the next risk factor of health status. Um, these people, if they do not have access to healthcare, leads to poor health outcomes. It leads to physical and mental decline. They are susceptible to acute and chronic illness. They have low immune system. Increasing age and changes in normal physiology make them susceptible to infections and other diseases. Next risk factor is nutrition. Poor nutrition is a result of poor health. Vulnerable population have limited access to healthy food due to poverty. Affordability of healthy nutrition is a problem. And as we all know, poor nutrition causes illness. Lack of knowledge to proper nutrition is a result of low literacy. The last risk factor to vulnerability is stress. This population suffers the cumulative effects of stress every day. They have undergone stressful experiences in their personal life and social life. They have feelings of hopelessness, and as we all know, stress leads to illness, both physical and mental illness. In conclusion, the cycle of vulnerability cannot be minimized. Vulnerable populations are exposed to constant social and economic difficulties. All the risk factors mentioned are all interrelated. When one problem is solved, another one quickly emerges. Vulnerable groups include persons who experience discrimination, stigma, intolerance, and subordination, and those who are politically marginalized, disenfranchised, and often denied human rights. Clinicians are undereducated about the lives and concerns of vulnerable populations. As nurse advocates, we need to walk with them and empower them to promote their physical and mental well being and promote health equity for all. These are my references. This concludes my presentation, and thank you for listening.